You can say it with emphasis, for it's ringing in millions of hearts all over the world tonight. That glad, glad news that we've been waiting for years. And here it is. Here it is.
To do this for like 2 hours and not record
it. It's bound to happen. It'll be like that Serious Hendrix master that it was there and it was done, but we lost the tape.
It was the best episode ever.
Speaking of best episode ever, welcome back to another podcast of Wood, Air, and Metal. Adam Keeler, and that's Tim Mirth through the grateful, wonderful internet. I don't know why the internet is grateful. Cat memes or something.
It's grateful.
I'm really tired, but
it's grateful for us being here.
You're all very welcome. Anyways, all right. So last week we started with what's the latest thing that I've been listening to and getting into. So let's switch roles. Listening to anything new and exciting or new and boring?
I'm gonna go backwards a little bit. And it's funny, I just posted about Facebook on it too, which was I'm revisiting the album that got me into jazz. And the story goes like this, basically. When I was a teenager, a wee teenager. I had started playing guitar when I was 10-ish. And I really, at the time, it's kind of funny. I started guitar not because of guitar players. I started guitar because I was curious about the guitar. So it wasn't like I heard Van Halen or something and I was like, I gotta play guitar. That wasn't my story. But anyway, I got into it. And then at first I started getting into like metal. This was like when the Metallica Black Album came out and Nirvana hit and all this stuff. It was like 91-ish when I started playing. You know, so it was just a wave of like guitar music. And so I started getting into all that. And it eventually got into like really heavier metal stuff too. But my dad, he was always into like, I don't know what age it happened, but it was sometime when I was like really little. He started getting into like smooth jazz and stuff like that. And he always had the Spyro Gyra albums and stuff. I could never bond with any of that music. Though I've seen those bands because I'll go to any concert. I like anything. And anyway, he had heard, because he was into smooth jazz, there's a lot of sax players in there. They had all said, you know, Coltrane's the greatest. You know, so this is probably like 94, 95, something like that. And my dad's like, okay, I need to go find a Coltrane album. But this is really like pre-internet. I mean, the internet sort of started. You get your 15 minutes a month or whatever.
Yeah.
And but there was no way to like find out information on it really. And anyway, so he went to the music store and he bought this Coltrane record. And Coltrane has like 60 albums or something. So why he picked this one, I have no idea. I'm imagining if it was my dad, he probably just thought the album cover was cool. But it's this John Coltrane album. It's called the African Brass Sessions. And he got in 95 or so they put out, so it must have been around then. They put out, maybe that's why, because it was probably like a new release. I never thought about that till now. It's probably like the new like reissue release. They did this complete African Brass Sessions thing, which is like an album you never talk about in the jazz world really, or you don't hear a lot. Well, I say that, but then I put this Facebook post up. Anyway, my dad heard it the first time, and he had never really listened to like, let's say, real jazz. And it just floored him. Like the album totally floored him. And he tried to get me to listen to it at first, and I was like, no way, because I was thinking, I don't like jazz. Like I don't like the smooth jazz stuff. Like that's what I thought it was.
Yeah.
You know. And somehow, some way, I eventually did listen to it, and it floored me. Like there's a song Africa. There's only 3 songs on the album actually, and it's just like the groove, man. It's like there's just like nasty, awesome groove that's going on, and like it like instantly nails you in. And it's actually like a very like modal It's during his like sort of modal phase. Upon reflection now, and it's pretty out there in a way. Like it's kind of an out there album, but not knowing like anything about music really. I was like learning music at the time, learning guitar. And then my dad really was very amateur musician too. I don't know, just like it just floored us. So I've been like revisiting that album a little bit. The reason I think it's kind of funny, so I put a post on Facebook like, hey, this is why I got into this music. And then I found out from a lot of people like that was like the first Coltrane record that like really floored them. Oh. I mean, even like some famous people, like it was that I had no idea. They're like, yeah, the Nels Cline, Nels Cline?
Yeah.
He played with Julie. I guess that he just like that was like his first Coltrane record, and he listened to it so much, and then eventually one guy, a friend of mine, said he saw that Nels eventually played with Reggie Workman, who was the bass player, and there's like it's all this like low E thing happening, like an E over D minor chord thing in the African. So he's like, every time you heard Reggie Workman playing an E, he was just like, man, because he listened to that album so many times. It's like just hearing that sound. So anyway, really cool album. So if you're on the fence about jazz, I mean, you might have preconceptions of what it sounds like. I did, which I meet so many people that like as soon as you say jazz, they think like Kenny G or something.
Oh, God. I was gonna say that, but go ahead.
Yeah. So if that's where you are with it, and you're just like, man, nothing ever sounds very good or whatever, or you like have this vision of it being, I don't know, like in a movie, like a silent movie kind of like jazz scene thing, which is great stuff too. But this one, if you can just put this record on, sit back, chill, relax, listen to it, I think might suck you in. Apparently it sucked in lots of great musicians at this point.
There you go.
So if you want to be a great musician, not like me, but like other people, you might want to listen to this album.
I'll have to put that on then.
But as far as new stuff, I've been so like into putting my thing out that I haven't had time to really find anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's if it wasn't for Apple Music suggestions right now, I wouldn't really move too much into different things. What were they listening to today? Podcasts today. There was a podcast day. So.
What podcast do you listen to?
I've been going through this one called Canis.
Janice?
Canis, Tanis. It's like a serial, as in like a series. It's kind of like this guy's investigating these legends. It's interesting. It keeps my attention. And when I have to drive, I have a 3-hour round trip.
Yeah.
I need something to fill the time. And that's how I got hooked on the first season. And it was entertaining. It was good. Nothing like, oh my God, I got to find out what happens next. But it's enough where it keeps the plot going. And I just found out that the 5th season is done. And so I'm like, okay, sweet. So it's like that. I was all caught up to the 5th season, and then COVID hit. And I didn't drive anymore. So I didn't do too many podcasting.
I mean, I've missed out on a lot of podcasts since then.
Yeah. So it was just like, eh. But now it's entertaining. It's good. Kind of weird, world traveling folklore, ancient history thing. No
That's
alien.
Cool. I love, like the podcast world's kind of interesting because it's like somebody's doing something about like every topic you can think of. Yeah.
Name it, it's there,
And there's somebody like obsessed and like really good at it. It's kind of cool.
It is. I mean, there's that. There's the literal podcast serial, lore, myths and legends, all that type of stuff. Those are all really interesting things.
Yeah.
Lore is always interesting because it's like creepy American folklore stories and stuff like that. Well, not generally American, mostly, and he does most of Western Europe as well, and old folk tales that are kind of horror-esque type of thing.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting, Sometimes
cool.
the aliens thing, but that's just the way that it goes.
That reminds me of. Have we ever talked about Coast to Coast?
Oh yeah, we talked about Coast to Coast. The good old.
Yeah. So if you're a musician that performs and you're, it's not as much anymore. I feel like the late gigs have died down a lot in the last 20 years. But when when you used to do those gigs, you know, and you'd finish at 2 a.m. and you got to drive home like 45 minutes. There's this Coast to Coast. I think it's Coast to Coast AM. Man, what? If you need to stay awake and you just want like the weirdest thing you've ever heard in your life to listen to, it's amazing. If you're not familiar with this show, yeah, like they talk like, in the host. I remember I had Chris Harold with me once. And we were driving back and I was like, man, you have to hear Coast to Coast.
Yeah.
And his comment was like, man, like I can't remember what they were talking about. It was like ghost or aliens or whatever it was. And he was like, the host is amazing. Mm-hmm. George Leary, I think's his name.
No, it was Art Bell.
What's that?
Art Bell.
No, I think it's George O'Leary or something.
I am absolutely certain it is Art Bell. Absolutely certain.
I'll have to look it up maybe.
I'm looking it up right now.
Yeah, look it up. But either way, the host is he's like, he never makes anyone feel like weird or dumb. They could say the craziest thing you've ever heard. Like, they'll say, you know, there's elephant ghost in my backyard.
I was right. It was Art Bell.
Oh, come on. Look up George something for Coast to Coast.
George Norrie is now the host because Art Bell died.
Okay.
But it was George Norrie.
On how long's George?
Or Art Bell, died like maybe 10 years ago.
Okay, so in the last 10 years, that's still been George. I've had gigs, Adam, that were late in the last 10 years.
We'll
Maybe you don't. Maybe you do those 6 p.m.
Oh, no, he died on 13th, 2018.
Okay.
So, who knows?
I wonder who it was then. I swear it was... Well, it doesn't matter.
Maybe it was a co-host, because it's still going on. Like, it's still going. So.
Yes, that's great, though. He like never makes anyone feel weird. Like, they could say the most crazy thing ever, and it's like people who live in the core of the Earth. Yep. There's people who live on Mars. There's ghosts. It's just an amazing thing. So if you're ever late playing a gig and you need something to keep you awake, just go to the AM stations and see if you can find it, because it always plays from like midnight-ish to 4 in the morning or something, right? Yeah. So no matter what coast you're on, coast to coast,
yep,
it'll probably be on at your late gig. It's a good way to stay awake.
It's really interesting, and Chris is right. The host makes everything with that, because he just, can...
Oh, he's so good.
He makes whoever is talking sound like it's the most important thing at the moment.
Well, and then they sound like an expert, too, right?
Yeah.
It makes them, like, expert... And it's not even just, like, he'll have guests every week, pretty much. Mm-hmm. And there's multiple guests. But there's also call-in people. And he's like, so, yeah, tell me what's going on. And they can even, like... Say they have a guest who's a paranormal psychologist or something. And the person could call in and start talking about aliens. And he never is like, well, the host here, or the guest is about paranormal stuff. He'll just be like, oh, really? So you have aliens in your backyard. And they've been talking to your children, and they speak through you through your dog.
So you're saying that you don't understand how these buildings are built, so it's ancient alien. Sorry, I just had to do it. I had to go with the big...
Yeah. Oh, man, it's amazing. Anyway, that was a pro tip. Pro tip. Stay
awake on the way home. Listen to Coast AM.
Yeah. The only problem with that show is they do have the long commercial breaks.
Yep.
They're like 7 minutes long. It's like, oh.
You can get the classic episodes on podcasts. Like
I don't know if I'm that devoted.
But it's just like interesting, and then you can just fast forward through the advertisements and stuff like that.
There you go. I kind of like the live aspect of it, whether it's live or not, like terrestrial radio.
Yeah, those are the radio. Wow, that's going back. And speaking of which, we have our pseudo first topic. I want to dive into that Dave Grohl comment. So I saw it floating around Facebook. I think we probably saw it on the same guy's thing. Jared Lee's phenomenal bass player.
Yeah, actually, you sent it to me first, and then I didn't see it. Yeah, I play with Jared, our band Chroma Drive. You should check it out.
Yeah, check it out. It's good stuff. But anyways, this will officially make this non-kid friendly, as I'm going to read it without.
Go for it.
All right. So he's going. This is his quote. Dave Grohl from Nirvana.
Who's David Grohl again? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I'm filling everybody in. You know, the drummer from Nirvana, lead guy for. Oh my God, I completely forgot.
Foo Fighters.
Foo Fighters. Thank you. It's, like I said, I'm tired.
AKA super wealthy.
Yep, and creative. I mean, shoot.
Oh yeah, he did that Queens of the Stone Age thing too. That was cool.
Yeah. Anyway, so here we go. He goes, when I think about kids watching a TV show like American Idol or The Voice, then they think, oh, okay, that's how you become a musician. You stand in line for 8 fucking hours with 800 people at a convention center, and then you sing your heart out for someone, and then they tell you it's not freaking good enough. Can you imagine? It's destroying the next generation of musicians. Musicians should go to a yard sale, buy an old fucking drum set, and get in their garage and just suck. And then get their friends to come in, and they'll suck too. And then they'll fucking start playing, and then they'll have the best time they've ever had in their lives. And then all of a sudden, they'll become Nirvana. Because that's exactly what happened with Nirvana. Just a bunch of guys that had some shitty old instrument, and they got together and started playing some noisy-ass shit. And they became the biggest band in the world. That can happen again. You don't need a fucking computer or the internet or The Voice or American Idol. Dash. Dave Grohl. So, on that note,
Yeah.
I absolutely love the points. I think that I think we're both in agreement with this, but the whole idea of just getting famous by showing up and singing and getting quote unquote discovered, it's just like, one, it's ridiculously naive. I mean, it happens on American Idol, but okay. It doesn't happen in real life. And secondly, there are plenty of phenomenal people that never bother to step onto those things whatsoever.
Sure.
They're musicians. And I think, like, the idea of the Insta fame from doing American Idol is such a garbage way to start your creative endeavors. It really is, because you immediately start under the thumb of somebody else's creative input. Like, everything that you do, like the contract that these people have to sign to whichever. I mean, they're laughing all the way to the bank, so there's an easy counterpoint to that. And would I play for the band at American Idol? Hell yeah, I would. Yes, take my money. But I think philosophically, it's like, you know, I really like his input on that. He's like, just get together and do it. Just do it.
Yeah. Well,
the input from these other people, and you have to show up on this thing and get judged by America, quote unquote, because it's such a weird judgment thing. You're competing against somebody else, which we've talked about that with competitions, but it's not even like the same genre, the same thing. It would happen to be like tweaking the audience that night. And if you're then you can hopefully maintain it, but you always get kind of picked, and you're always put into a pigeonholed box of a genre, and that's kind of your thing. And then eventually you might be able to break out.
So there's a little bit of a misunderstanding here, though, which is the people that win that show are good.
True. I'm not implying that they aren't.
No, but so the point to that is none of those people were just like, oh, I was singing in my car one day and I decided to get in line and now I'm a superstar. Like, they work their butts off prior to getting there. Maybe the like view from the audience is like, oh, this person just sang at bars or whatever, and like that's not a big deal. But like, they had to do all that. They had to sing at the bar and take voice lessons, and nobody who's won that show was just like, oh, all I ever did was sing in the shower. Like, the people that won that show have been singing forever. You know, like, they had to practice a lot. Mm-hmm. So it's not like they were just, oh, I just born that way. I just was born singing.
Well, he skips over that in the quote, but yeah. I tend to go back to the whole thing of just like, you know, he says it right in the beginning, you know, okay, this is how you become a musician. You stand in line for 8 hours with 800 people and kind of like take your shot at it. That's how you become a recognized musician in the sense of popularity things. But I like the ending of it. Is, you know, it's like, I had one student that said that they were really talented, really good, and still are. But they remarked that it's like, yeah, I just want to kind of like, I want to get the famous thing going. And that hurt me, like, that immediately got under my skin. I was just, well, if we're gonna keep this non-PG rated, I would just like, fuck fame, you know, fuck that aim, and get good at your instrument, and then that'll follow. Like, put the time in now, and because if your aim is not at doing something well, you're never going to get the other thing unless
Yeah.
you're intentionally like that shebang guy, the American Idol. With that, it's such a irritating setup, but that's not necessarily that kid's fault. It's because that's what they saw on TV. It's like, and that just really irked me. And
Sure.
there are clearly anybody that makes it to the top of the game, regardless of whether and again, I think we talked about this before, whether about they are playing pop or if they're doing jazz or if they're doing whatever, they're working hard at it. Nobody just kind of like glides by it and gets it done.
Yeah.
I might not listen to that particular genre, but that doesn't mean that they're not in the studio for 16 hours a day trying to get tracks thing and falling asleep at this mixing board, waking up and doing it, keep going. That's how anybody successful does it. And
Sure.
I think that's the other thing that irks me when people are like, well, this artist slept in their car. It's like, well, duh. Welcome to what you did when you toured. It's like, boy, I could get a hotel and go deeper into debt, or I could sleep in my car and drive to the
It's
next,
free. Yeah. Right.
yeah, it's free, and you use a gas or a truck stop shower. Make sure you wear sandals and go to the next show. That's what you do. That's what I did. That's just the way that it goes, and you hopefully make enough money to keep below your like emergency budget dip in, and just keep coasting for a bit, and then you get home and you're like, yay, I did a tour. Now I gotta go work. So
Yeah.
it's just that's
All my bills are behind. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's just part of the routine. There's not you're never gonna make it by buying the tour bus first.
Yeah, I guess. Well, the only reason I mentioned the other thing is that it's still a skewed perception from anyone who watches that to think that the people never worked to get to those things. My wife was telling me the other day she watched the Nirvana, or she watched the Kurt Cobain documentary that his daughter made.
I heard about that.
Which was great, she said, and they didn't really like hang out on the death, but that he was like very depressed like most of his life, And anyway, she was reflecting on a scene from her. Basically, Nirvana had that first album, Bleach. No one really noticed it, and then Nevermind was the one that sort of like broke. Right, became like one of the biggest selling albums of all time. And anyway, he brought it home before it was released, and had her listen to it. And so she listened to it. She listened to the whole thing with some headphones on or whatever. And she said, apparently she came out and she was like, "You're not ready for this, man. You're not ready for what's about to happen to you. Like, it's amazing, but you are not ready. Like, he never wanted the fame or whatever. And it's like, you just made something that's going to be one of the biggest things that ever existed, and you're going to go from nobody to, extremely famous overnight. So I guess I'm bringing that up. Is that really much different than the American Idol thing? Nirvana hit. They went from basically nobodies to the biggest band in the world overnight. And it's because of, MTV and all kinds of other, social cues and stuff that made that popular. We all got sick of the overly polished, 80s rock whatever thing. Yeah. Oh, now we can't even show this video. It's going to get taken off.
There we go. So many copyright strikes in so much time.
Yeah. Anyway, so it's kind of like, well, can you really knock American Idol in a way? They show this sort of like instant fame, but Nirvana had instant fame as soon as they put that out, basically. And because they got signed and it was the right timing and all these kind of things, like all these things sort of had to line up. I don't know. It's kind of weird to think about a little bit. But.
See, I don't think that they were. I think they were relatively unknown outside of the Seattle West Coast rock thing. But that doesn't mean that they weren't necessarily successful. Because if you get one album out under a major, like semi-major label, during that time, it wasn't the same type of musical atmosphere. Like you could be moderately successful and like paying your bills and coasting off of that. Even
sure.
So,
yeah, it's just funny. That reminds me. Like I remember the times when, like, if you couldn't sell 10,000 albums, like, you were basically like a crappy local band. Like,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
now you like major label artists don't sell 10,000 albums. It's kind of funny.
Exactly, and that's
Yeah.
where it's like the whole dynamic, the pre and post Napster musical world is dramatically different. I mean,
Sure.
it just is, and good or bad, there's a lot of different arguments, and we can maybe go to that subject on a different thing. But I think overall, like, you know, they had the sustainability of that much where they went through their indie things, released a major label release, and then they
Yeah.
had the follow up with it. And that, kudos to them. I'm not knocking any of the progress with that, but I think that it's like a different type of overnight success than
Yeah.
American Idol, where it's like, I don't know. I mean, I haven't watched American Idol in forever. I can't remember the last time I watched it.
Oh, it is over like 16 weeks or something, right? No, I'm just kidding.
I don't know.
Which was probably slower than the rise of Nirvana once they got signed. But anyway.
But yeah, and that's what I mean, though. It's like Nirvana, when they got signed, they had major label backing. So the question is, did the publicity push the album, or the album push the publicity, or was it it's probably a combination of both. You know, clearly. I mean,
There's a lot of factors, right, that must have taken place. You really was like, everyone got tired of, like, I remember, wasn't it like months before that like, she's only 17 or something, like one of those songs came out, you know, it's like, she's cherry pie or something like that. That was what we came from. I think everyone just like hit a max of total cheese ball, like rock, like spandex, whatever rock.
Mm-hmm.
And now you finally had somebody who was like real. It was like there's a lot of like social cues or whatever that got us to that point too. People were just tired of the tight jeans and the.
Well, it's like a movement of music. I mean, basically, you know, it's like you had the Baroque swing to the classical era, where you had this highly structured contrapuntal stuff going to basically a melody and harmony.
Yeah.
And that was it. And then, you know, the classical swung to the romantic because they wanted to break a little bit more of that Bach, more elaborate harmonies and directions with thing. And then the romantic gave way to serialism, which really wrecked everything. You know, it's like there's always been a response against the current prevailing styles of the days.
Those took like, you know, 70 years or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah,
and this took 10 years, but yeah.
But it started shrinking. You know, it's if you go from like, you know, pre-Renaissance music to where it was just vocalization and antiphons and choir music to Renaissance. The Renaissance to the Baroque was a much smaller time. And then the Baroque to the classical was like 70 years. And the classical to the Romantic was 50 or 60. And then the Romantic to the serial was like 30. You know, if you take the 1900s and 1930s when serialism took over, and then serialism to aleatoric stuff and you know, chance music to kind of push back against that, and then everyone was like, this is getting too stupid, and swing back with the minimalist movement. You know, that happened relatively quick, and then you had neoclassical, neo-baroque, and everything else, and we're sitting in the, I think it's postmodern now or whatever.
Everything's modern when you're there.
When you're there, exactly. So I think that times as publications become,
it compresses, is what you're saying, though.
Yeah, I'm thinking that it kind of compresses that turnover because it doesn't have the same amount of travel time that it did before. Like somebody printing a book of music during the Baroque era to somebody putting a thing out online today is drastically faster spread.
Don't you think a little bit, though, like, I keep wondering what's going to happen with the music scene right now, because it feels like we're a little bit like back in the sort of 80s thing.
I was just going to say.
But it feels like we've been there about like 17 years, you know, where the 80s thing only lasted 9 years or something. So
I'm going to interject. I think that's also because now it's very easy to pick the music that you like, and that's it. There's no radio dominance.
Yeah.
Like at all. Like, I mean, it's out there, but like, who really pays attention to that? I don't think I've checked the top 40 in 20 years. Ever since I got my first iPod, it was like top 41. I don't care. I have the music that I want to listen to enough before that, and go off of the recommendations. Maybe it's the type of my personality type or whatever.
Yeah. I was telling my daughter today that back in the day, you know, every weekend you'd go to the music store and buy a record or buy a CD or tape or whatever. And you never knew what it was going to be. Like you would get a recommendation, somebody would say, check out this band or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
And you'd go there and there'd be 7 different records. Like my dad buying the Coltrane thing. He's like, well, which one do I get? I don't know. This one looks pretty cool. Like you'd really literally do that. You'd be like, this looks cool. I like the cover.
Especially when you were doing with vinyl, because like the cover was huge. It's like the artwork kind of
like you'd really like, that's how you would judge it. And then, you know, because you couldn't listen to it before, it's not that uncommon that you would come home with a record that you didn't like the first time you listened to it. But the problem was that you spent your $17 on it or whatever.
Yeah, that was it.
And you weren't going to get another new one until the weekend because you had to work or school or whatever. So you were going to listen to that thing like 15 times in that period. And a lot of times you would hit a record like the first time you listen to it, you're like, I just don't get this. It doesn't work for me. But I bought it, so I'm going to listen to it again. And then by like the third time, you would be like, oh, huh, what's that? And then, you know, you start to like it.
Mm-hmm.
And what the generation now, right? They don't get that experience of learning to like something that they don't like initially.
Or taking the time to get it past the initial aesthetic interaction. I remember when Achtung Baby came out. That's a glaring example for me. It was like it went from Joshua Tree and Rattle and Hum to Achtung Baby, and it was like, what in the ever living hell just happened to my band? You know, because they had one particular style, and then it was a complete revamp, like out of left field, you know. And I remember getting that album, being like, did I buy the right band? Like, did I get? Is this V2? Did I just misread it or something? Like, what's going on? And then it obviously became the groundbreaking thing that it was.
Yeah.
But that was like one of those direct experiences where I just had to listen to it again and again, and then it started to, okay, this is pretty cool. All right, I get it.
Sure.
You know, and getting into it, and that. But nowadays, you're absolutely right in terms of like if it's I don't like it, click.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's no like I'll never listen to that again.
Now, I'm not necessarily like that. You know, maybe that's kind of because we grew up in that other area. It's like I'll grab something and I'll at least give it a couple of listens before I decide that I just don't like it. You know, it's not like it'd be like, nope, not going to do it. Like to tie this back to the other episode, the Beach Boys,
Pet Sounds.
Pet Sounds. Like my first listening to it, I was like, this is not my groove. Like I can appreciate all the production stuff with it, but I'm just like, this is just not my style, not at all. I'm just like, okay. But like after the third or fourth time, you know, it started with serious listening, like the headphones, the whole experience, and everything else. And I went on to go like, all right, let's throw it on the background, let's throw it on in the car, let's just get it going, let this soak for a bit. Then I started to get into it. It's still not my first choice with anything, but I really started to enjoy it. You know, it's like,
oh man, it's so good.
Or the outtakes. Ones and the Smile, his next album that is like mostly there.
Did you check out Smile?
I haven't listened to it yet. It's on the list. I kind of got music listened out, so I jumped on a podcast for a bit. So.
Yeah, the Smile is definitely interesting. It's worth the trip, but maybe you should listen to Pet Sounds a few more times and get it in your bloodstream. But it does feel like the next generation of what was happening with Pet Sounds. So the problem is it never got finished. So there's just a lot of like sketches of ideas, and you're like, oh man, that would have been so cool. You know, like if you would have actually had the support to finish this, you know, that would have been great.
So what do you think are the chances for Dave Grohl's final thing of like kids just getting together and playing music? Seeing what happens.
So totally all about that. I mean, and maybe that I'm biased because that's exactly what I did.
I'm all about it too, but what do you think of the chances of that actually being something where it's like no internet, nor computer or stuff like that, and they say forget the Voice of American Idol and kind of make it in a grassroots type of way?
Sure, I think that's all possible.
I don't think there's any way to do it without the computer or the internet necessarily. I'm not saying you have to go to a streaming.
I don't know. You know, like man, I struggle with that.
Like, how do you promote a show? Like, there's no other outlet.
I know enough musicians who have completely zero internet presence. unless somebody took a video of them or something and posted it without their consent, and they just don't know because they're not on the internet, who have really good gigs and are well respected, much more than me. Maybe people on the internet don't know them as much, but the venues know them. The people that hire them to be in their bands that tour around the world know them, So I don't know if that it's really necessary. So sometimes I'm like, is it even worth the time to do the internet thing? So I think it's possible, I guess. It's kind of almost like if you're good enough and you're playing with the right people, you'll get all kinds of opportunities. Yeah, and I don't think the internet dictates that.
No, that is for sure. I mean, the only thing that will dictate with that is a matter of people talking to each other via text message or whatever. Facebook Messenger being like, "Oh yeah, you want this? This is how you hire this guy."
Yeah, I mean, like we were talking to Brandon, right? And he was talking about his instructor giving him gigs, right? Even if Brandon was never on the internet, he would have got those gigs because he was a good student, was playing well. And those are probably good gigs because the professor, as like a professor who had good gigs that was sharing those gigs. And no matter what you do on the internet, you're never going to get those gigs. The only way you're getting those gigs is if you study with that guy and you happen to be friends with them and they give you that gig. So there's that whole other side of networking that, I don't know. I don't think it's necessary. Before I forget, go ahead. Yeah.
No, go ahead. I didn't have anything.
I was going to kind of change subject, same subject, but we were kind of talking about this when we were chatting about whether we talk about the Dave Grohl thing, which is, it's not so unoften when I play a gig or something, somebody will come up and say, "Oh, you're so talented," or some kind of thing like that, and they're like, "Oh, I tried playing guitar, but I was horrible at it." It's like, well, yeah, well, so was I, so was I when I started, and I still am, but so that,
all right.
But I mean, it's like there's this misconception, regardless of the American Idol thing, I think, that people just assume that musicians are born or something. Mm-hmm. And it's such a misconception. I really don't like that word talent. People say
I agree. I think it's all work ethic, to be blunt. I mean, it's a matter of how much they're going to spend on the instrument. There's clearly advantages to being born into a musical family because they can give you the equipment in the sense of the language a lot faster than not. But that being said, if you're dedicated enough to it, you're going to grow as a musician and keep going. Like I haven't met anybody that how do I put this the most succinctly? Every single one of my students that have gotten an A has just done the work.
Sure.
That's it. They put the work in, and whenever they tend to be, especially at a collegiate level, if they're falling behind, it frustrates me because I don't think that anybody is non-musically talented. It's just a matter of how much time you're putting into it. That's it.
Right.
And I think that goes across the board with a lot of stuff. Out of like maybe being a linebacker, which I clearly will never be, no matter how hard I try. It ain't gonna happen. But outside of that, there are certain levels and certain skills in most fields. I think that if you have enough dedication to, you can hit it. That's it. But how much is it going to cost you? Because there's other stuff you could be doing. And those guys that gave up on the instrument, so to speak, were just like, there's so many multifaceted reasons why they just quit and thought that they sucked. If they played the instrument once a week and didn't see any improvement, it's like, well, you're not going to, or even if they just kind of noodled every couple of days.
Yeah, I'm wondering. I was thinking now, just like when I started playing, and probably when you started playing, it's like you did something and you were like, just to do that the first time or something. For some people, they say, well, that doesn't even sound like music.
Like, to me, it was like, I can do it.
Like that, to me, to us, it was like, holy moly. Like, what did I just do? Like, wait. Let me. like it was like that was like, oh my gosh, that was the most amazing thing ever. Where some people would look at that and they go, well, that doesn't even sound good.
Mhm.
I think I've heard my kids say that. They're like, oh, I tried it, but it doesn't even sound good. It's like, well, maybe that's not gonna be your thing.
And on this weird side note, that's one of the things like when I was studying with Pierre, because everybody would ask like, well, what about your son? Does he play? Like, he plays piano a little bit, but otherwise he's like, I don't want to play guitar. He's like, "That's too-" It's like,
Yeah, sure.
I was like, that's an interesting way to put it. And then you have just to kind of keep this little tie in with what we mentioned. Kenny G's son has like this crazy shred metal band. That's actually
right.
It was like
I kind of forgot about that.
Yeah, they was like, that's great. I really like the album. It was more of like one of those train wreck curiosities of like, that's going on over there. Wait, Kenny G's son just came out with a metal album. This I gotta see. But it was legit. It was totally legit. It was great. And I can't remember what the heck it was called. Either way, because that was like years ago when that came out.
Yeah, sure, I remember that kind of. Yeah.
It just kind of goes like, the artists' kids may not exactly follow in their footsteps and become the next great artist thing, but whatever. I wouldn't want to force them into it. I'd expect them to at least give it a good try, but whichever.
I guess I'm at the point where it's, if they're not crazy about it, then I know it's not going to work anyway. So it's like, and I can't, if the worst thing you could do as a parent and be like, you will be crazy about this, it's like, well, that guaranteed to backfire.
I'm gonna take the other course. I don't think that's guaranteed to backfire. It's a weird combination because that's how some of these childhood prodigies go. Their parents just
but how many of those childhood prodigies play after they're like 18 years old?
That's what I was just said. It's like that's also might be why they quit, but it also depends on what level that they get to. If they start singing a paycheck, jack, they're gonna be like, maybe this isn't such a bad idea. Maybe I'm glad that this pushed me like that. Like not into the sense of like having a 3-year-old sobbing at the piano keys because they didn't practice for 3 hours a day. But it's such an interesting gray area of where you push the drive to get them to the next thing and not let them sell themselves short, and whether or not you're crushing something else that they're really interested in and want to be flourishing in. So it's a
yeah. I mean, I think when it works out though, it's like they were the one, they would have been obsessed anyway. Like they would have been obsessed with music. You just happened to pick the right thing. And you forced them to do it, but you didn't really ever have to force those kids. Like they wanted to do it anyway, And I think like it seems to me too, like you see a lot of times where it's like the 7th kid is the one that's the musician because like they tried with the first 6 kids and like it just didn't stick. Yep. But that 7th one was like, oh, why is there 17 guitars in the house? Oh, you tried this with Jimmy and Johnny and Jacob, and like none of them liked it.
Well, Celine Dion, strangely enough, and I just caught this because of some documentary on her, is the 14th kid. 14th. And she made it. So they at least tried 13
Yeah, right.
times.
That's right.
It's like, all right, well, whatever. It's clearly worked out for her.
Actually, that'd be interesting to know how many first children do it. And get in a little bit of psychology here. And you're not are you the first child?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, my situation is weird. I'm the first child in my parents' marriage. My dad had 2 others before me.
Okay.
Another marriage.
So maybe that changes the role. So first children tend to be more pampered, right?
I don't know about that, but
they get a little bit more attention at first.
Oh yeah,
They get they always get everything first or whatever, and then also they tend to be like probably more responsible. Maybe I'm not a first child.
Okay. Man, I'm gonna say the pampering thing. No, definitely not.
Well, maybe at first though. So what happens though, right, is the youngest ends up getting like the most pampered, right, wherever that is. But like I tend to see like first children often like very risk averse, and all these kind of things. Maybe this is generalizing too much,
Yeah, I
But
don't think I'm risk averse. I was heavily into rock climbing, so I enjoyed that, and I still want to skydive. I just can't. So,
or maybe I'm trying to think of the right words. Maybe risk averse isn't the right one. But I don't know, I'd be curious to see, like, you see a lot of times though, like I said, like the seventh child, the fifth child, this third child, whatever, become the musician. And I think a lot of that is like their older brother or sister or whatever was kind of into it. And you hear about these stories all the time where they're like, oh, they were listening to Led Zeppelin, or
yeah.
they brought in Hendrix or whatever. And I was like, that was the coolest thing ever, because they had this like big brother that was showing them stuff.
In one
And
sense, I have a reverse story on that.
yeah,
Like for me, it was my younger brother started playing, so I had to start to play. Like I couldn't learn something that I couldn't.
so yeah, there was a competition thing there.
There's
Yeah,
a competition there,
interesting.
absolutely. And it was kind of like a reverse, but I still think that you're absolutely right, and that plays into it. Like having an older sibling or even a younger sibling, you know, and we were close enough in age where we didn't go to the same high school, but that age gap was, I mean, it's 2 years. And then he started to do it, and then I noticed that people were kind of, I want to say that I noticed that people were kind of paying attention to him.
Yeah.
And I was like, no. No.
How old were you when you started?
14
Okay.
ish. Right now, that's going to be like the one in my head that's stuck for the longest time is 14, maybe 13. I can't really remember. You know, that's going back way longer than I want to say.
You know, it's funny. It's funny that you say it the way you did, because I could almost imagine my older brother doing what you did, but he didn't. Maybe that's because we only had one guitar or something. But I remember we took piano lessons when we were younger, and I hated it because it was so competitive. It was always like, I did better than you, and like between, it's like, oh, I'm 3 books ahead of you, or you know, or whatever. It's like, it always just felt like that, and I just despised it. And I think if my older brother would have started playing, probably it would have been a negative thing for me.
Yeah, it's stepping in your space.
It was like, oh, this was kind of my thing, yeah. Well, I think too, like, maybe it's the rowdy like middle child, second child thing where the rules are less applied, or less but also a little bit more like stubborn and willing to take some pain to keep up with your bigger brothers, kind of thing. There's like an element of pain you have to be willing to take to play music, and it's not just like physical pain; it's also like the emotional, mental anguish you have to deal with when somebody hates what you did or tells you you're horrible. You have to get past those kind of things, or even yourself, like even yourself thinking you're horrible. You have to say, well, I'm horrible, but that just means I need to work on it more. Instead of saying, well, I'm horrible, I don't even bother. Like, let's throw this thing out.
That's why I work. They're taking my frustration on the weights.
I don't know. Interesting. I don't know. I'm not articulating it very well, maybe, but
no, everything made sense what you said. I think, like, fundamentally, you're right in that there's weird sibling competition that happens, even if it's not a direct competition. There's still something going on in terms of birth order and how that plays into the personality types and how those personality types attack certain things that make them unique. You know, like you could even say like that age is where kids tend to strike out and be on their own, try to find their own identity. You know, and it happened to be around a guitar at that time.
Yeah.
And Aaron, my brother, was definitely like more in the singer-songwriter type of thing, and I was more in the, you can do that with this, I'm going to try and do that. You know,
sure.
Trying to push.
So does he still play?
No, not at all. Like he can still pick up a guitar and strum through songs and sing and play, and he's got a great voice. But like in terms of anything more than strumming chords, no. You know, where I was like within a year and a half, I was doing note for note Satriani stuff, trying to imitate all that and get as many of the tab books as I could and learn the tracks and just soak up as much as possible.
Yeah.
And part of it was just to show off, and part of it was just because I did like it, and I still do enjoy Satch. It was funny, like when I was tracking a solo for that thing for the game, I listened back to it and I'm like, holy crap, that is definitely some sass stuff coming out of me. Like totally there it is. It's like whatever. It's different, and it obviously, but it's like if I were gonna pick who was my big influence, oh, that's who. It's clear there, and that's just the way that it is. I'm not gonna. I think I'm mature enough in my musical journey right now to be like, that's just the way. That's just my voice and electric guitar. That's it. Sure, I'd love to do something Vias or Sean Lane or crazy shred picking or whatever, but it's just not what comes out.
Right.
Okay, that's fine. I'm happy with it. I don't think it's negatively impacting where I'm at stylistically, though.
Yeah, I think when you have to hone in on your particular thing, right? Which is classical guitar or nylon string guitar. Yeah, so it's like we got to pick. You can't be good at everything, so you got to pick your battles sometimes, right?
Yes, exactly. It's like I can hold my own relatively well on electric guitar. Probably not anywhere in the same room as like you or Brandon, especially around anything that's changing relatively quick. But that's just because I had to pick, and I picked. And I like where I'm at with nylon string and sitting there poring over a score and working on a single phrase for hours rather than working around chord changes. But that's great.
Wait, I mean, you're talking to the person who tried to do try to do classical and jazz, and you can only get so good if you do that. I think you'd really limit your.
Unless you're Anton Boyer, in which case it's like
there's so many parallels in the way that he plays those styles that I don't think it's as big of a stretch as it seems. Maybe sometimes.
I actually agree with you just about completely on that. Like I just seeing the way that, like in terms of the concepts of balance of voices, tone control, execution of the lines, keeping things going. It's like there's a lot of crossover with that.
Yeah, no, he's smart. Yeah, smart the way he plays it.
Yep. So,
and he's incredible. Obviously, this is not a knock on him at all because he's unbelievable. Yeah.
He's ridiculously good.
Yeah.
And even with that video that you sent me today about my 5.
Oh, the Scarlatti thing.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that because I started out with him doing like the Sound of Silence arrangement, which was absolutely brilliant. And then it's like, oh, he plays Scarlatti. I'm like, well, let's see how he does. And I was just like, oh, well,
damn it. Oh man, it was clean. It's really clean.
Oh yeah, it was perfect. It was absolutely well done. All the stuff where you can tell when certain guys are faking classical guitar.
Yeah.
This was not faked at all.
Yeah, it was cool. What I noticed about his take on it, and even just that little bit of time, is that it, I don't want to say it swung, but it grooved.
Yes, absolutely.
In the right way. Hmm? And it's like, man, you don't hear that a lot in the classical world,
No, not at all.
And only from the best people, right? And that's like, man, he has that thing.
Yeah, well, it's like I saw this pretty well-renowned classical player do an interpretation of Autumn Leaves, and I was like, perhaps next time you can remove the broom from where it is currently located and get a little bit of a groove or a swing and get some life into that. It was a decent arrangement, and it was technically difficult, but it was one of the most lifeless interpretations I've ever heard.
Yeah, and you do unfortunately hear that.
And it's really, it's like kind of the reverse. Like, in one sense, seeing like a rock guy try to play Bach on a classical guitar, and then just
that's so bad.
Hit the notes mostly,
Right.
and this was the reverse. It was a classical guy trying to do this jazz thing, where it's like, well, you also hit the notes mostly. There's a little bit more to that, and it was definitely this. Clearly showed that some people are just in one world and that's it.
Yeah.
I think like Boyer is going to be another Deans. Absolutely.
Well, I guess I haven't really heard what he's written or not, but it's interesting.
Written pieces are fantastic.
He
has this thing going on that he releases like every week on Soundslides of these counterpoints of the day.
Oh, nice.
Those are literally, he does one every day that he writes, and it's like, are you kidding me?
That's awesome.
It's so good, so stinking good.
Well, a lot of the, it's not just guitar that has that problem too. Classical piano and other instruments. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of like lifeless interpretations of pieces.
Oh,
technically they're correct, the timing's right, but they sound like a computer did it. And I think sometimes, like when I heard the Scarlatti, I was like, well, yeah, because that's a dance. Like it's supposed to be a dance, but you play it in a way. If you don't play it that way, you know, like if you play the notes right and it's very technical, and I know it's hard to play, but it's kind of like a lot of those things are actually were meant to be dances.
Some of them. Garlani was mostly sonatas. Like he wasn't like Alaman, Karan, or a suite. That I'm gonna kind of interject a little bit just because I'm like, I have to justify this degree. Charging it.
Well, I guess does a sonata imply that it wouldn't be a dance?
No, and that's where I was going to temper what I was saying. It doesn't necessarily imply that, but it was all harpsichord stuff. So in terms of dynamic stuff that Boyer was doing, they just weren't. It wasn't available. Like a harpsichord has zero dynamics.
Yeah, sure.
So it was all consistently plucked at the same thing. So there was a lot more rolling and slight, very slight syncopation of syncopation is the wrong word. Splitting of a chord in order to get certain voices to stay out in the front because it was all evenly weighted. So seeing him take the liberties, which they really are on the guitar, comparative to what the original instrument was, is what kind of like shows that he really understood the harmonics that the Scarlatti was doing and what it was implying and how, because it was just like perfect dynamic stuff to me perfectly.
Yeah, sure.
Which again was the most frustrating thing to watch. It's like, wow, God, just stop. For the love of God, let me have some small smidgen of space here. But it's like, nope,
No.
Can't get rid of that. You know,
Give that up, yeah.
Yep. It was just, which also has me curious about like getting into like really maybe taking a summer and getting into gypsy jazz and really kind of getting into the fundamentals of that and playing it, because it's like, I wonder how much crossover, because the picking technique to me is something that I really want to get with. You know, it's like Satch's stuff in one sense is in the legato Holdsworthian type of style. I mean, Holdsworth's stuff's 10 times better, no offense to Satriani, but that's just the world that Holdsworth created. I mean, the guy was absolutely incredible. So most of my stylistic stuff is, you know, not straight picking in a consistently quick way. I can pull it out every then and again, but it's definitely not as
that reminds me, so that's my buddy has that Streetwise guitar channel, and he interviewed Antoine. And we talk about his picking style, and he talks about how like the gypsy world, it's mostly downstrokes, and it's in there almost like rest strokes.
Yeah.
So even when you go up an arpeggio, it's always upstrokes. You know, it's not down or whatever. So those kind of things, like, there's a very like specific ways that you play with that style, and obviously works.
Yeah, it does.
They also, you can see like their arms more in like this sort of position too. So there's really interesting, like there's almost like a full world of like pedagogy that doesn't exist in so much other guitar music, but there is in the gypsy jazz world of like how you do everything. You know, how would you?
I got into it for a little bit because I had a student that was interested in it, so I brushed up, like swallowed as much information as possible to just be competent at it at that time. You know, and then when they stopped, it was like, okay, I'm gonna back to the specialty, and that's that was a piece of advice that one of my teachers gave me. He's just like, learn the pieces your students are playing. Don't ever assign something that you're not going to at least play through.
Oh yeah, sure.
And it's like, I mean, that makes sense, even if it's a sight readable piece, because it just helps you to be completely aware of what they're going through. You know, in any way, shape, or form.
That makes sense.
It's just part of that. So I do. It's like part of my practice routine is going through all the pieces that my students are playing. You know, except for this past weekend where I was still using a chainsaw. You know, lots of bodies to get rid of. I mean,
lots of wind a few weeks ago. Man.
Yep, exactly. Tons of wind. Good lord. But we're almost done with all that. Almost. So, anyways, back to more specific topic things, because I do like to keep track.
Yeah.
Keep things we got that, and then we had the whole. Let's end with the discussion on musical preferences by personality type. That I found super interesting, but half of me was like, "Is this just kind of like pseudoscience?" Like I can't.
Yeah, it felt really pseudoscience. So I found an article today. I sent it to Adam, and if I think about it, I'll put it in the description here, but it was like the 16. Basically, they were implying that they thought that musical styles that people preferred really didn't have anything with your personality type. But upon further reflection and further studies, they're finding that the type of music you listen to actually does have a say on what your personality type was. And there were 16 personality types. And I guess I'm assuming you could probably be a little bit of a few different ones, maybe, or something. But it would be like, rock music means that you like this, and country music means you like that, or you're like this kind of person. What kind of annoyed me, and then I'll let you talk, is there was just so many like cliche things. Like there's something like, I think it was like in the metal one, they're like, you're the logistician, and that's because, and you like bands like Tool because their music so like odd time signatures and illogical, and I was like, well, that just seems like, did you just make that up? Like if I was gonna just make up. Apparently, people who like Logic like bands like Tool and Rush and Dream Theater or something. It's like, and it's like, and there was something about, if you like pop music, you might be an entertainment type person because you like the flamboyant like entertainment stuff. It's like, did you just like say, well, if you like pop music, then you obviously like to be the center stage. So it just felt a little bit too cliche. Now, perhaps though, because you have to be skeptical of everyone, including yourself. Perhaps we are that simple, and that is just the way it is. Like, there was like a jazz one, like you like to improvise, but you also know that it's important to be a master of your instrument, which means you like to improvise in regular life, but also be an expert at your subject. It's like
well. There is no improvisation without mastery. That's as simple as that.
But it was so cliche. Sorry, I'll let you go.
No, I completely agree. It's very cliched, but I'm also wondering if that happens to be just because of the website and the layout. Because the thing that had me go, well, there might be a little bit to it, is because like the debaters, which is what I took this personality test recently, because one of my students is a counselor. And so they were like, oh, do you find yourself being like this type of thing? Just friendly banter and stuff like that. And I was like, nah, kind of, but not really. And I'm like, all right, fine, I'll just take this test and get it done and whatever. Because I've done like the Ngram thing, and it's like, oh, you're the what was I? The
is that the one with like your G57Q? Where isn't there like 4 letters or something? Like
no, that's a different one. That's
okay.
That's the one that you sent me. The Enneagram is kind of a different type of personality test, but it's like I was the outlaw. That's what was my personality type.
Okay.
It's like you like to function on the fringes and kind of push things out there, but you can just get along enough to be functional in society with everybody else, but you really don't. But I'm like, because Julie made me do it. It's this type of thing, and I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. And I was like, yeah, that definitely sounds like me. Like the answer, like, yeah, totally. I'm very much fringe on some things and whatever. It's not like I'm trying to break a mold to be unique. It's just like, just leave me alone. That's what.
So what music are you supposed to like, Adam?
No, that's what I was getting into. On this thing, when I took this test, I came up with like my personality type was the ENTP, the debater. It's like, oh, that definitely sounds like me. Definitely. But they said like 76% of the debaters, and it says like for debaters, the intellectual challenge of comprehending the complex tonal structures of classical music may be a key part of their enjoyment to the form. Check. And there's everything else. The debaters might particularly love those composers who push orchestral music in strange directions, even at the risk of unsettling an audience, such as Stravinsky or Cage. Huge Cage fan. Stravinsky, I like what he did, but it got something that I'll turn on.
Interesting.
I
love Stravinsky. Yeah.
I mean,
he's one of my favorites. It's like,
I love John Cage. I love his writing. I think it's fantastic. Really, really cool stuff. Stravinsky, it's not that I never really gave it. I think I never really gave it the chance in the same level that I listened to other particular guys.
Yeah.
So I'll have to maybe spend more time with that because Kazuhito.
I know the Rite of Springs is super popular, but it is like the most perfect piece of music. It's so good.
Why it's so good. It's freaking classic.
Because there's like nothing wrong with that piece. It's like perfect. There's not many pieces I can think of like that.
Yep.
And that's not even probably his best stuff. That's amazing. Anyway.
And I believe the Stravinsky quote, somebody asked him when inspiration strikes. He's like at 9 o'clock in the morning. He's like, and but his point was that like, I'm not sitting there and just all of a sudden, I have to write. He's like, I'm up and writing at 9 o'clock from 9 to noon. That's my writing time. That's it.
Right.
You know, sit down and I just do it. And I love, and that's kind of like my philosophy when I'm teaching students. I'm like, you're never going to be inspired to play. You might be, but that's going to burn out so quick. You're never going to know it's going to bite. You have to just pick a time, and that's when I'm doing it. And even when you don't want to do it, you do it anyways. And eventually, you'll enjoy it, regardless of how you feel. And that's the point.
Yeah.
Anyways, so just to go back to the personalities thing, I thought that was one of the things that goes, all right, I'll sell you on that one, because it was also like the hard rock and metal, where it's like, that's pretty much all that I listen to. You know, it's like classical, metal, and, you know, I like some electronica stuff, but I don't necessarily like, it's not like always on. And I like, was that around midnight?
No, I should, but
I mean, shoot, we're getting copyright struck like crazy right now, so might as well. You know, I don't really throw on the like the alternative stuff much at all. It's not that I dislike it, but I don't really find that.
Would you consider Actung Baby alternative?
When it came out, yeah, absolutely.
I'm just curious.
Like, absolutely when it came out, but nowadays it's kind of
Post-rock.
well, it was such a trendsetter that everything's kind of like following after it.
Yeah.
In my opinion. But I kind of like, I can see this lining up, you know, but I'd have to meet other people that fell into the personality things. Maybe you should just do this test and see what you come up with, and we can see if it's...
Well, how did you do the test? You just read through them? Because I just read through them. There was a test?
There's a test. It's free. You just go in there. I mean, I'm looking at... Oh, it saved my test. I'm logged in. Holy crap, there it is.
Also, there was a test. Interesting.
Yeah, there is a test. It's
so I was thinking, you know, I just read through all of it, you know, quickly, but was...
So no,
I was like, it probably doesn't apply to musicians, because like most musicians I know will listen to just about anything. So it's like I like everything really. I don't even know. The only things I struggle with are like pop, country, and smooth jazz, but pretty much everything else I like. So I'm like, I don't even know, and it's sort of like a day by day thing. Like sometimes I feel like I want to listen to pop music. Sometimes I feel like I want to listen to atonal classical music with knocks on the wall or whatever, you know. In other days it's death metal, or like it's really all over the place. So I'm not sure how I'd answer it. It would change daily, I would think. But I don't know.
No, I agree. I generally, my stuff will change almost daily, but I don't think it really changes too much stylistically. Though that's also why I jumped onto podcasts, is because I was kind of getting bored to death of listening to the same albums again and again, which I thoroughly liked. And I found the one thing that was interesting is that I would start that Thrakel album again, because I've probably listened to that, I don't even know how many, at least 100 times by now.
Yeah.
But it's such a good album that once it starts, man, I gotta finish it. It's just like, yeah, let's keep going through the whole thing. And it's only 20 minutes long, you know, but it just, to me, it's like the guitar tone is fantastic. You know, the prog writing is just great. It grooves well. You know, it's a great use of chordal stuff. And it's just like, yeah, that's cool. And it just hooks me right from the beginning. And that's it. I just got to listen to the whole
Interesting.
thing.
Man, I'm such a different listener than that.
Yeah. That's what I mean. It's like, it's just a click. That's it. You know, I'm listening to the album.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely do that, but it's very like it's the third time, then I'm done for 6 months, you know, or a year or 5 years before I ever listen to it again. I don't have this like the repeat listen to stuff. Really, I just don't do it very much.
Well, not in a row. I don't think I've ever done that.
I mean, not in a row. I mean, but just like over the last month, have I listened to the same album more than a couple times? Probably not.
And absolutely for me. Like right now, in fact, I gotta get a hold of this guy because I need another hit. He just got his album is done and it's getting published in a couple of months, and I got a preview of it, so I listened through it and it was great. Like I really liked it.
Oh, the Thrakil one?
No, this is something else.
Oh, okay.
And it's like I have when I wake up and the songs are running through my head, that's usually a good sign. So it's just like, dang it, now I got to hear it again. You know, so I got to ask for permissions to go to the Dropbox and to listen to it again. And it was great because it was also like hi-fi masters. So
Nice.
Like for all the detail is that.
Yeah,
And
sure.
something I honestly noticed about YouTube and its music, like when you're watching a music video, the sound quality is superb if you're on your computer. It's like the detail is huge because I would listen to the same song in my iTunes library and none of the detail would be there.
Right.
Which is like, what the hell, man?
Yeah, I paid for this.
Yeah, exactly. And so I started down the rabbit hole of like, can I get higher quality masters and Apple Music? And I think that you can on your computer, but I everything is running great for my software, and I am not jumping up another iteration. My iTunes, I still have iTunes. That's where I'm sitting on Mojave, and then in the next one up from Mojave, I think it was Big Sur is the latest, or whatever Catalina changes it to Apple Music rather than iTunes. They just that, and I'm like, I'm not moving. Everything's working. I don't want to look at my computer software update button. You know, I don't want to see it. I don't know what's gonna do. So, anyways, but yeah, the 16 personalities thing, it was interesting. Some of it sounds pseudoscience-y. It clearly does. Maybe it's just the writing and my sensitivity to pseudoscientific garbage, trying to make itself seem valid when it's not. And personality tests always generally piss me off, period, because I'm like, well, it honestly depends on the situation. Like, I'm never going to be always that. So if you're saying that's my personality, it's like, well, it's kind of no, it's not, because, and maybe that's just a debate of personality, but it's like, you know, would you do in this? Are you somewhat likely, more likely? And I'm like, well, it honestly depends on the context.
Right.
Know?
Yeah. You didn't ask a very good, succinct question. Yeah.
Yeah. And even then, it's like, well, you know, would you use a knife to cut X? It's like, well, what am I cutting and what for? A steak? Sure. You know, a piece of bread? No, I wouldn't use a steak knife. You know what I mean? I'm having a poor time explaining, or not a hard time. I'm just explaining it terribly. But it's just the questions are asked that are so potentially situational that I can't just take it at face value.
Yeah, I'm wondering. So we take these tests, you know, this for jobs and all kinds of things, right? And then you get your personality type, and apparently that's supposed to tell you a little bit how to interact with other people, and maybe highlights whether you'll be leadership material one day or something. But has there been any test on the outcomes of those? Like, okay, so you did this, and these 10 people, these 100 people did this personality test, and then you said, okay, well, these 3 have potential to be good leaders. Did they end up becoming good leaders? Yeah. Were these 3 happy? Did they end up quitting? Like, whatever state you were in before, is the state improved now because you did this personality test? Mm-hmm. You never seem to see those results.
Yeah, and there's also the assumption that, you know, personalities don't have some validity to it. Like, you know, if you tap into the test at this particular thing at this age, that's the way you're going to be forever. And it's like, no, that's just not true. You know, maybe there are some things underlying that are always going to be particularly driven in you towards a particular thing. But it doesn't mean that overall personality isn't, because musical tastes change. Like, if I played the stuff that I listen to now to my 14-year-old self, I would have been like, what the hell is that?
Yeah, sure.
And that's just the maturity factor goes into that. You know, right now, I can't see myself not ever enjoying classical music for the rest of my life.
Yeah, sure. It's so vast.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing too. It's huge, and maybe that's also because of the crazy amount of availability that I have now. You know, if I was stuck with having to buy an album every single time, I think it would be limiting to what I would listen to with that. And stuck is the wrong way to put it. You know, it's like it's the only way to buy something would be to buy it. That's what I do. That's what I do with bands that I like. Or it's
Yeah, right.
It's like I'll go to Bandcamp and pay for it. Fine, done. You know, that's it. But and even then, you do get a little bit of a sense of what the album's going to sound like.
True.
It's as you're putting out your preview. Speaking of which, so yeah, you have your little preview thing coming out, and that'll be a little taste of. Well, of course, the way that your album is it's a preview that it's an album. I don't think your album. Not everything is going to be remotely in the same mold as a track that you're going to release. So, which is great. You know, it's all over the place in the best way possible.
Yeah, I was trying to. I'm curious. I've had pretty positive feedback on the teaser thing, but it's like that section doesn't sound like a lot, pretty much any other part of it, but there's enough variety in that like 25 seconds that I'm hoping that the indication that somebody hears it is like, okay, well, this album goes a lot of places. And if you have that frame of mind, then you're in a good spot, I think.
that would be a great review. This album goes a lot of places. So yeah, but yeah, so that's that.
All right, well, I'm gonna get off here so I can take that personality test.
Oh yeah, I'll send you the link.
And I'll say you love country and religious music.
Yeah, I saw that category.
I know.
Like, CEOs listen to religious music. Really? Why do I find that extraordinarily difficult to believe?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, that was the personality type, right? That wasn't a CEO necessarily.
Oh, really? Maybe I read that wrong. So,
I saw that too. I was thinking that can't be right, but
yeah, maybe. Yeah, because it took me a while to find my personality. I was scrolling down and so on.
Yeah.
So
hopefully I'll be a CEO.
There you go.
All I listen to is AMP.
Oh. I wonder if
does Bach and Liszt and Coltrane and Meshuggah, does that also count as religious music?
Well,
Run DMC.
You're more apt to have a religious experience listening to those than to make religious music. Just to be blunt, I'm just gonna say it. There it is.
You know the thing oh my gosh, I probably shouldn't go here, but
oh come on, we're already
the thing that bothers me about a lot of the like religious thing, and it's sort of like the total record label deal. Yeah, I remember when I was in high school, I had a couple people that I played with that were, very religious, and they weren't allowed to listen to like Nirvana and stuff like that. But the Christian record label that they were allowed to listen to had a band that sounded like Nirvana. They talked about Jesus. And they had a band that sounded like Cannibal Corpse, but it was Jesus. And I was like, this seems disingenuous. Like, it's like we steal this style and then we change the words. Mm-hmm. And it was very like explicitly a stolen style. It wasn't like just those bands happened to sound like that. They were like intentionally made to sound like, we need a band that sounds exactly like Pantera, but good lyrics. Yes. Good help.
Yeah, no, dude, that's exactly what it is, and that's
horrible. I hate that disingenuousness. Like, certainly there are bands that could be very religious, that are very innovative, and they do their own thing. And that's amazing, and I will listen to that any day.
And that's my point. It's like I'd be right there with you with that. But when you see this, what's the way to put it? Separate brand but same taste.
Yeah.
Like it's like it's the cheap cereal knockoff at Walmart.
It's McDonald's, not McDonald's.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like this. You can't just do your own thing. It's got to be let's put a pizza stamp on it and call it decent stuff. It drives me personally insane, but that's my. It's like I just can't do it.
You didn't like that band with Christ Cobain in it?
I hope you're joking, but I don't.
I hope I'm joking too. I actually don't know.
Oh, good Lord! I don't think you legit are, but it's like you might be joking, but there probably is something like exactly like
Yeah,
that.
I know.
Like it's
I remember, man, since I'm going down, I remember this. I was at the gas station and somebody handed me a pamphlet, and she's like, "Hey, this is to help kids, that need food or something." And I'm like, "Oh, sure, I'll take it." But then it was like a Jehovah Witness thing, and it was like, "Have you talked to Jesus lately?" And I'm thinking like, you would have gotten a lot further if you said, "Hey, I'm with this church, and I really like it, and I think it's good, and I feel safe and whatever there. Here's a pamphlet about it. You don't have to read it. It's cool. Like just be genuine with me. Don't say like this is to help kids who like don't have their families or whatever it was. It's like,
it's like the tracts that look like $100 bill, and you open it, and it's like Jesus loves you. It's like clearly he doesn't.
yeah,
That's a $100
like
bill.
is that's the way you get people is through like lies and just be genuine. I don't have any issue with the religion. Like there's no problem. You can be religious, but just be genuine about it.
Yep, and that's pretty much it. The genuineness is there. I mean, I can't think of like. For myself, it's like you come from Bach and the quote unquote high church stuff, which to me, Bach is clearly I'm a uber fan.
Yeah.
But then you look at where things are now, and it's like, oof, what happened to you? It's like you're not even trying anymore. And
a friend of mine who's pretty religious, and I can't remember if it was Bach or Beethoven or Liszt or it was somebody like that. I think it was Bach though. And it was like, imagine if you thought every piece you were putting out was like being judged by God. Like, how good would you make that piece?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's a pretty good motivation. Like, I'm not religious, but I could imagine, like, I can like get in my head and understand that concept. Like, okay, would you put out that one song, that wasn't so good, you didn't quite finish yet, and like, you probably wouldn't. You would say, I need to rework that until it's good enough for some all-powerful thing to.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think there's like some really great things can come out of that. That's an interesting like thought experiment.
Yeah, it's
but
like
yeah, you're right though. Like, how did that go from that to some of the things you hear today? Maybe they think that it's the same thing. I'm not sure.
I hope not. I hope not. I sincerely hope not.
Or it's like, or they never listen to something like Bach, because it would seem like, well, once there's Bach out there, like if I want to make a mark and have the powerful one notice me in a sense that I'm doing good, I should probably try to do a little bit better than that. Maybe not better, but at least as good, right? Like you would.
That's part. Maybe that's part of my particular problem. Is diving into his shoes. It is crazy every single time I play it, because there's always something new, some other nuance that just goes up, and it's like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, this guy thought like this on a daily basis.
Sure.
Lived and breathed it, and I probably spent 15 years diving into classical as a specific discipline, and I'm always finding new stuff.
Right.
I remember that's one thing that Steve taught me when I was getting lessons with Bach. He's like, you could be studying this fugue for 20 years, and you're going to find something new.
Yeah, it's going to change.
Yeah, it does. It like some little nuances. Just like, whoa, I had no idea that this voice was appearing this way throughout the piece. And just random things, but it's all interconnected. It's like, and it's intentional.
Right. It's almost like you can't see it until you worked on it for a while, and then and it's like then you see one thing, and then once you figure that thing out in a sense, and you've learned it, now that's like this other thing pops up, and then this other thing pops up. It's like
Yeah. Well, it's like mastering. You fix one thing, and then it's like, oh, fixing that makes this do this. Oh boy.
Yeah. Now I need to fix that. Yeah.
Yep. And kind of tweak it. But that's the beauty of playing some Bach. It's great like that.
Sure.
It's fun and makes me want to quit at times. When you play it great, when you play it great, there's nothing better. It's just like you're the king of the world. Even when you play it mediocre, but when you just can't get the notes out, it's like, that's.
I did start learning a couple years. It's been like a year or two. Some of the cello suites on viola.
Yeah.
Yeah, I should revisit that. I haven't played viola really in a while.
I
I
definitely,
love that sound though. It's like it's such a great sound. Yeah.
I definitely like the viola compared to the violin. Maybe it's just because of where it sits on the spectrum of like hertz. It's just a
Right.
lower end to it, um, than the violin. Though, like listening to Bach's violin works on violin, especially on a period instrument, that's really wild.
The
That's
yeah, the Bach sonata stuff on the violin is
mhm.
it's beautiful. It's stunning.
It is, and that's why it's still around. You know,
Yeah.
I wonder how much. That's the other thing. It's like for as big as Nirvana was, will they be there? Will we be talking about them in another 100 years?
They probably will be. Well, the Foo Fighters probably not, right? It's like
I don't know. I mean, time will
it
be
seems
tell.
like there's some bands that will probably should call it here, but
Yeah,
like I feel like there's some bands that are probably safe to be around for the next 100 years at least, like the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, Nirvana. There's probably a few other ones, but there's not that many that are at that sort of like. So not only just like musically like known, but like there was very big social cues with them, especially the Beatles and Nirvana. Really, there's not
yeah.
many bands quite as like big of an impact on the whole like social world as those two, maybe in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
Um, so it's hard to imagine they disappear. I don't think that'll happen,
Yeah.
or at least not in the 100 years.
Yeah, I mean, it also one of the factors I was just thinking about is like, accident. There it is.
That's not a copyright strike because he's been dead for a long time.
Oh, dude, I had somebody try to copyright me playing a Bach piece, and they're like, somebody claimed a copyright, and I just disputed it, and I put, it's Bach. It's like the guy's been dead for what 1750. So at least 200 and some odd, or
Yeah, right.
200 years. It's like 270 or something.
I love to own that copyright though.
Yeah, no kidding. Maybe somebody from his family can come out and be like, I'm Bach's great grandchild. Though, the side note, there has been a Bach doing music in a court since like 1400 is when we have the first official record of a Bach being a court musician.
Nice.
Like, it went down through the family. Like, everybody was a musician. Handed down again and again and again and again. So that I thought was very fascinating. It's like, wow. And then you figure he's the Kwisatz Haderach of musicians, just kind of like being bred to do that, and eventually,
Yeah, sure.
400 generations down the line, there he is, Maldiv.
Well, he wasn't actually that famous when he was doing it though, right? It wasn't until like Mozart and Beethoven, like maybe I don't know if it was Beethoven, but definitely Mozart like called him out as being great, and then Mozart was popular. So then
he was well known, but he wasn't like, because Haydn was the guy that was or Handel, right?
Haydn probably. It was probably Haydn. That would have been. Well, you mean Handel was popular, is what you're saying?
At the same time period as Bach.
Yeah, that would have been Handel. Yeah.
Yeah. So Handel and Bach, like Handel was definitely like the pop star. Like everybody knew who he was, and his stuff was all over the place. Bach was known, but he never got even close to the same level.
Right.
And then as his stuff got rediscovered, is that like everybody was like, wait, what? Studying the contrapuntal stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of like Mozart, and then eventually like Wagner, right? I think Wagner was the one that really like propelled it to like today's status.
It was Schubert.
Schubert, okay, but it was around that time.
Yeah, and their contempt. I think.
So, but it's kind of funny though because it took like 150 years to become like Bach is God. That didn't happen like at the time he was alive. It took like 100 years later.
And I think part of that, I mean, just because it'd be another huge rabbit hole, but part of that is because some of the stuff that he was doing wasn't done again for another couple hundred years. Like, the guy was using 9 chords and everything like that just wasn't done. And then all of a sudden, when those guys started doing the writing, they started to incorporate that and was like, oh, there it is in Bach. It's right there. He's using it, well ahead. And you can literally see that. You can see those things in Bach, but they're just poof everywhere else.
Well, then, like, Mozart has great counterpoint, but then after Mozart, the counterpoint kind of died.
Oh yeah.
Until Wagner, time periods. It's like you had this sort of lost an art form for a while.
Yep, absolutely.
But man, It's funny. I think we were talking. Oh gosh, we're just so off topic now, but we were
Whatever.
talking about that talk
Listening.
book or whatever, the Ernst talk.
Yeah.
And I don't think I realized how good Mozart's counterpoint was until he was highlighting it in that book. And then I went and started listening to all kinds of stuff, and I'm like, holy moly!
Good God.
Yeah, like it's really good. So,
Going on right now.
but because there's a lot of Mozart that doesn't really have it.
Yep.
So it's really, I mean, and there's he was so prolific. There's just so many pieces, even for like a 27-year-old or whatever.
Yeah, where I probably
He's like, God, he put out so much stuff. So you could easily listen to like 10 hours of Mozart and never hear any of it. But then when you actually do find it, you're like, wow, he was a master at it.
In the symphonies, like that's where you see that.
Yeah. How many symphonies? He had like 50 symphonies.
I don't know off the top of my head.
It is like 40 or 50 symphonies.
Yeah, it's up. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Because it's the Jupiter one definitely has it. That's like the huge explosion of counterpoint.
Yeah.
It's just kind of just what the heck just happened, you know?
Yeah. Once you're in the right frame of mind, Mozart's kind of funny that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as my buddy, well, you know, Kevin. He's like, Mozart is one of those composers that like suddenly got extraordinarily interesting in his writing, and then he died. You know, it was just like he finally.
Well, there's moments though, right? Like
yeah, absolutely, and it's absolutely, and that's
there's moments throughout, but yeah, right at the end, that Requiem's incredible.
Oh God, that's absolutely sublime, like just unbelievable.
Yeah.
So,
but yeah, there's only like moments before that. I think a lot of it too is like when he writes in major, it comes off a certain way. It's good, but it's kind of like, okay, you kind of, once you've heard it, you heard his little tricks and you kind of like hear him a lot. But when he actually, which he did sort of rarely in more like minor stuff, it's so good. And you can hear the Bach influence and stuff too, but it's like, he's awesome. He was awesome.
Yep. Yeah, all those guys are good because they were good. Like they were legit. You know, it's like Beethoven was phenomenal. He was causing guys to literally leave town after competing against him. It's like, yep, I quit. That's it. This guy moving somewhere else where Beethoven is not around. Just destroyed it. And I mean, just reading how he dismantled them is it's so funny. You know, he's like, you know, they play each other their pieces and they'd give each other subjects to improvise on. And then he would take the subject that the guy has, you know, he'd do his improvisation, then he'd flip it upside down and write an entire sonata on the spot with the theme upside down. You know, it's just like, really? Like, who does that? And
sure.
A whole different level.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Different time. Okay, we should call it.
Yeah, we keep calling it, but we don't. All right. Thanks for listening. If you've made it this far.
If you've,
a thumbs up from us, at least. Congratulations. Enjoy the background talking of me and Tim on the bunny trails at the end.
That's right. Peace.
Peace.